The chilly evening wind whipped through the streets of downtown New York, carrying the distant hum of traffic and the occasional honk of impatient drivers. Emma tightened her worn coat around her trembling shoulders and clutched the folder of hospital papers like a lifeline. The city towered around her, glass and steel monoliths reflecting the dying light of the sun, but tonight, all that grandeur felt cold and meaningless. Her daughter, Lily, was inside a hospital room somewhere across town, hooked to machines Emma barely understood, fighting for her life. She had already exhausted every possible option. Friends and family had helped when they could, but their pockets weren't deep enough. Banks had refused loans, insurance had left gaps she couldn't fill. And now, here she was, standing outside the office of Jonathan Hale, one of the wealthiest men in the country, a man who had built his empire from scratch and somehow always seemed untouchable except maybe for a cause that moved him. Her heart pounded as she approached the towering glass building. The doors slid open silently, swallowing her small frame into a world that smelled faintly of expensive wood polish and leather. The receptionist glanced up from her computer, her expression polite but distant. Emma's voice broke as she spoke, raw and desperate. Please save my daughter." The words hung in the air. She hadn't expected anyone to act, and part of her felt foolish for even asking. But she had no other choice. The thought of losing Lily was unbearable, a weight pressing against her chest so hard it made her legs shake. As Emma stood there, almost ready to turn away in shame, a shadow fell across the lobby. Jonathan Hale himself had appeared, tall and impeccably dressed, with eyes that seemed to scan the room with a mix of curiosity and empathy. He had heard her plea. Something about the urgency in her voice, the fear in her eyes, stirred something deep inside him, a memory of his own mother, who had once faced a crisis with no one to turn to. For the first time in what felt like forever, Emma felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps her desperate plea hadn't fallen on deaf ears. Perhaps someone could save her daughter after all. Jonathan Hale had been reviewing quarterly reports in his sleek, minimalist office when a faint, frantic voice drifted up from the lobby. At first, he thought it was a street performer or someone looking for directions. But the urgency, the raw desperation in the woman's words, made him pause. Please save my daughter." Something about the plea penetrated the calm barrier Jonathan usually maintained. He rose from his chair and walked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, then down the elevator to the lobby. The polished marble floors reflected his sharp shoes, and the hum of the building's ventilation system seemed to fade as he approached. Emma froze when she noticed the tall figure approaching. He was impeccably dressed, radiating confidence and authority, yet there was something in his eyes, a softness, a hint of empathy, that made her voice tremble even more. "Tell me what's happening," Jonathan said, his tone calm but commanding enough to cut through the chaos in her mind. Emma's hands shook as she handed over the folder. Pages of medical reports, bills, and letters from hospitals spilled from the folder like evidence of her helplessness. "It's my daughter, Lily," she choked out. "She has a rare heart condition. She needs surgery now, but I don't have the money. The hospital says if we can't pay up front, they can't operate." Jonathan flipped through the papers, his brow furrowing as he scanned the numbers and medical terminology. But he didn't hesitate. Instead of being paralyzed by the complexity, he focused on what truly mattered. A child's life was at stake, and this woman had nowhere else to turn. "I'll take care of it," he said simply. His words weren't accompanied by hesitation, excuses, or legal disclaimers. They were a promise. Emma blinked, unsure she had heard correctly. You mean, you can help?" Jonathan nodded, already pulling out his phone and making calls to the top specialists he trusted. Within minutes, arrangements were being made. The finest surgeons, immediate scheduling, private hospital rooms, and even a team to manage the payments and insurance hurdles. But he didn't stop there. Seeing the exhaustion and fear etched into Emma's face, Jonathan added, "You won't have to worry about the ongoing costs either. I'll set up everything to make sure Lily gets the care she needs, and you'll have support too." Tears welled up in Emma's eyes. Relief, disbelief, and gratitude collided inside her chest. She had walked into a cold, indifferent building seeking a miracle, and found one. For Jonathan, it wasn't about headlines or recognition. It was about humanity, about choosing to act when someone's life hung in the balance. And in that moment, the fates of Emma and Lily began to change forever. The hospital corridors were eerily quiet except for the occasional beep of a monitor and the soft shuffle of nurses' shoes. Emma sat in the waiting room, gripping the arms of the chair so tightly her knuckles turned white. Every second felt like an eternity. Her mind raced with memories of Lily's laughter, her tiny hands clutching Emma's finger, and the endless nights spent praying she would be okay. Jonathan Hale arrived quietly, his presence calm but reassuring. He didn't sit. Instead, he hovered nearby, offering a silent strength that Emma didn't even realize she needed. "She's in the best hands," he said softly. His words were simple, but they carried a conviction that gave her a fragile thread of hope. Inside the operating room, surgeons and nurses worked with precision and urgency. The rare heart condition was delicate, even the smallest error could have devastating consequences. But Jonathan had personally ensured that the top specialists were present. As the surgeons moved with meticulous care, Emma's mind swirled with fear. She couldn't watch, but she couldn't stop imagining every possible outcome. Hours felt like days. Emma's hands shook, her chest ached, and tears kept slipping down her face. Jonathan remained by her side, occasionally offering a word of reassurance or simply a steady presence. He didn't offer false promises, he just stayed, showing her that someone cared. Finally, a soft knock on the door broke the silence. A nurse stepped in, her expression calm but warm. "The surgery was a success," she said. Emma's breath caught in her throat. "She's stable, and she'll be moved to recovery soon. You can see her now." Emma's legs gave way, and Jonathan gently guided her to the recovery room. There, Lily lay asleep, monitors beeping steadily, the rise and fall of her chest finally regular and strong. Emma's tears spilled freely, a mixture of relief and overwhelming gratitude. She kissed her daughter's forehead, whispering prayers she didn't think she had the strength to voice before. Jonathan lingered at the door, observing the mother and daughter. He felt a quiet satisfaction, not pride, but the deep fulfillment that comes from knowing you made a real difference. For Emma, Jonathan wasn't just a billionaire, he was a lifeline, a bridge from despair to hope. In that moment, Emma realized something profound. Life could be unbearably cruel, but it could also surprise you with miracles in the most unexpected ways. And sometimes, it takes just one person noticing a desperate plea to change. The course of a life. Weeks passed since Lily's surgery, and Emma could hardly believe how much her life had changed. The fear and despair that had haunted her every waking moment were gradually replaced by a cautious, shining hope. The once insurmountable medical bills were fully covered, thanks to Jonathan Hale's intervention. But more than that, a safety net had been put in place, financial support, counseling, and a network of resources that Emma never imagined she would have access to. Lily's laughter returned first. The fragile, timid giggles that had been lost to illness began to fill their small apartment once more. Emma watched her daughter run across the living room, tiny socks sliding across the wooden floor, her eyes sparkling with joy. Every movement, every smile, felt like a miracle. Emma often caught herself pausing, clutching Lily's hand, silently thanking the universe, and Jonathan, for this second chance. Jonathan Hale, for his part, had returned to his life of high-stakes business and philanthropy, but Emma's family had left a lasting mark on him. He occasionally checked in, not out of obligation, but out of genuine care. His presence had reminded Emma that even in a world dominated by wealth and power, humanity still mattered. The experience had also inspired him to expand his philanthropic efforts, creating programs that reached struggling families who otherwise would have slipped through the cracks. For Emma, the change was profound. The weight of debt and desperation no longer clouded her days. She began volunteering at local hospitals, sharing her story and offering hope to parents facing the same impossible choices she once faced. She had learned that miracles weren't just handed out, they were sometimes sparked by one person noticing a cry for help and acting without hesitation. One quiet evening, Emma tucked Lily into bed and watched her drift off, peaceful and safe. She whispered a soft prayer of gratitude, knowing that life had given them a second chance. The world outside still held challenges, but for the first time in a long while, Emma felt equipped to face them. She wasn't alone anymore, and Lily's future was no longer a question mark hovering over her every thought. In the end, it wasn't just about wealth, status, or power. It was about compassion, action, and the profound impact of choosing to care when it mattered most. Jonathan's intervention had saved a life, but it had also ignited hope, transformed a family, and reminded everyone involved that sometimes, one act of kindness can echo far beyond a single moment. Emma smiled as she watched Lily sleep, feeling an overwhelming sense of peace. They had survived the darkness, and now the light was theirs to embrace.